Hello and welcome back to Seeing Things Differently. My name is Alicia, and in today's episode we are going to be focusing on the practical impact of a dementia diagnosis. Finding out that your loved one has received a diagnosis of dementia is obviously life-changing, and often it's hard to know when and where to start making changes in order to support them. So as hard as it can be to process, having that confirmed diagnosis is something that can be so helpful. Knowing what's causing your loved one's symptoms can make it easier to understand their behaviour, encourage you to start looking for the right kind of support, and it allows you to start implementing those practical changes supported by knowledge and understanding. There isn't a cure for dementia yet, but that doesn't mean there's nothing we can do to help our loved ones. And by understanding what a diagnosis means for us in a practical sense, we can ensure that they are able to live well and safely at home. So the first practical aspect to consider is that we might need to make physical changes to our home. Now, this doesn't mean that you have to uproot everything and change the entire house immediately, because making physical changes to your home to help your loved one can be a gradual process and one that you as a carer might need some support with. In my experience with my dad, who has a visual form of Alzheimer's disease called posterior cortical atrophy, we found that even simple things like keeping spaces nice and open by moving furniture to the sides and removing rugs and decluttering had a huge impact on his ability and his confidence to navigate through our house. It's a good idea to think about the layout of your furniture, because there might be a better way to arrange the lounge that removes obstacles and makes it easier for your loved one to be able to sit down, turn on the TV and watch their favourite show without any support. Rearranging rooms can also be a really fun thing to do together, so ask your loved one to weigh in and share with you what would be most comfortable and accessible for them, and then carry out the task as a pair. As well as comfort, it's also super important to think about safety. And that goes for everyone living in the house, not just the person living with dementia. Knowing how to make your house safer is not an easy job, so you might want to get some input from a professional, like an occupational therapist. Their job is to help assess what changes you could put in place to make life easier and safer, not just at home, but in day-to-day life in general. You can get a referral to an occupational therapist by speaking to your GP or contacting your local council. I've linked more information in the description in case you'd like to read more about how other professionals might be able to help and where to find them. Professional input can be a huge help, but there are also lots of things that you can do yourself to ensure that your home is safe. I learnt when caring for my dad that small things like checking that your smoke alarms are working meant that I could feel more relaxed, because I wasn't worrying about the house catching fire and me not knowing about it. If you've never checked a fire alarm for yourself before, I've linked a video in the description that shows you how, but just be aware that it does make a loud noise, so it might be best to watch the video and check the smoke alarm when your loved one with dementia is out of the house, especially if they're quite sensitive to sounds. Getting a carbon monoxide alarm fitted is another great way to boost safety and peace of mind, and I've linked the fire service website in the description too, so you can take a look at their advice. Another item that I didn't hear about until later into Dad's diagnosis, but that I think would have been so useful, is a locking cooker valve. When it's locked, no gas is supplied to your cooker, so there's no chance that your loved one could unintentionally leave the gas on or turn the cooker on while you're at school or work. So again, it's a practical change that brings you greater peace of mind when you're not home. There's a link in the description to a website which can tell you more about this device and has a form to apply for one for free if you live in Scotland or England. As I said at the start of the video, it's not about making lots and lots of changes in one go. Some things you will just pick up as you go along. For example, we didn't change the lighting in our house straight after Dad's diagnosis, but when it became clear that he was struggling to navigate to the bathroom at night, we installed brighter lights in the hall and bathroom, and then would leave them on while we were sleeping so Dad wouldn't need to wake anyone up if he needed the bathroom in the night. Little things like that can make a really big difference, so I've also linked the Alzheimer's Society booklet on making your home dementia friendly in the description below. I would like to just take a moment to pause here and say that changing your home and having strangers in to install different devices or offer suggestions on how to make things safer can be really unsettling and quite unpleasant, not just for your loved one with dementia but also for you. Our homes are intended to be spaces where we can feel calm and safe, and that's why I think that making gradual changes when they're necessary can be a really good way to get yourself through it. It doesn't matter if you're a child or an adult, it's always hard to replace some of the cool things in your house with more practical items that you don't necessarily want. But something I was told a while ago was to remember that your loved one is experiencing the world in a completely different way to you. They can't help that they can't do certain things anymore, so it's just not worth getting stressed over things like them not being able to sit comfortably in their favourite armchair anymore. Instead, we just have to accept that it's time now for a change. The fact that you're even watching this video and thinking about how to support your loved one already shows just how much you must care for them. Try to remember that when you're feeling overwhelmed. So another practical impact of a diagnosis is that you'll need to make changes to the way you live your life day to day. Now these changes won't be huge, and from my personal experience, I think you get used to them fairly quickly if you stick to practicing them. So one thing I learned early on was that it takes Dad a lot longer to get ready in the mornings than it did before he had dementia. We would often struggle because I would get frustrated that he was taking 10 minutes to put on one sock and I was going to be late to school if he didn't hurry up. Something I then figured out was that if I allow myself the maximum amount of time it could possibly take to get Dad ready, then I wouldn't find myself rushing around or late for school. So, if getting dressed could take anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour and a half, I would always allow the hour and a half. That way, if we get it done in 15 minutes, perfect. Now I have more time for my homework, or I can sit and watch TV with Dad and make a cup of tea. And if it takes an hour and a half to get him ready, then I'm still on time because that's what I planned for. I also noticed that this really helped my attitude because I wasn't as stressed, so I was a lot more patient when helping Dad with things, and I noticed that made him feel more relaxed too. So then in general, it was much easier to get him to cooperate with any instructions I was giving him. Now obviously that doesn't work every time, and there are going to be days when you won't be patient and tasks like getting dressed or washed might end up with everybody in tears, but that's okay. Remember not to beat yourself up and that tomorrow is a new day. We can try again and we can try to be better. Mindfulness and meditation are talked about so much these days, and it is hard to know whether they're worth trying, but in my opinion, they can be brilliant tools for finding your routine and nurturing that patience and calm. You don't necessarily have to sit cross-legged on the floor listening to the sounds of the rain for 30 minutes if that's not your thing. It's not my thing either. But you could try keeping a journal that you write in once a week or just whenever you have some quiet time, and then slowly start to make it a more regular practice when you feel ready. As an example, when my dad wouldn't respond to a question and it seemed like he was ignoring me, I would go away, write down my thoughts or feelings, and it just helped distance me from that experience and think about it in a much more objective way. I could make space to remind myself that Dad isn't being difficult deliberately, and more importantly, his actions aren't personal. Maintaining a mindfulness routine is not an easy thing to do, and it's definitely not a quick fix, but it's part of making those practical changes to support your loved one. I think one of the biggest changes that came about after Dad's diagnosis was that I had to take on more responsibilities at home. I'd already discussed the emotional impact of that in my previous video, but in a more practical sense, I had to learn a lot of new skills very quickly. My mum would sometimes work abroad, which meant that I was left in charge, if you like, while she was gone. Mum would always leave me really clearly planned out lists for me to follow and meal plans for the week, but I still had to learn quite quickly how to cook, clean, organise a calendar, get myself and my brother to school in the mornings, prepare Dad's lunch, and much more. At 14, that was a mammoth task, but if I had to take one positive away from it, at least I knew how to cook, clean and do laundry when I got to university, because a surprising amount of people didn't have these skills. Something that I would have found useful at that age is a good website with lots of healthy recipes that are quick and easy to make. So just in case it helps anyone, I've linked one of my favourite websites in the description. Cooking, cleaning, doing laundry, sure, they're all pretty dull tasks, but they are useful in later life, and you being able to cook a nice meal and clean up the house and keep it organised can help your loved one to feel safe, happy, and more importantly, loved. It can be so tempting to change everything at once and start doing tasks for your loved one with dementia, but I would like to add a reminder here that whether you're caring for your mum, dad, uncle, partner, whoever they are, they're still them. Dementia, especially some of the rarer forms, can progress slowly, and people might be able to have a great quality of life living independently for a long time. Make sure you ask your loved one if they want your support and offer to help rather than just taking over tasks for them. It's tempting when we know someone needs support, especially if you're in a rush or just really busy, to insert yourself into whatever it was they were doing and just take over in the interest of time. However, this could really knock the person's confidence. My dad would often make cups of tea for himself, but with time he became less able to do so. I would see him struggling, get up from whatever I was doing, and then move him aside so I could just make the tea and get back to what I was doing before. But I never actually asked if he wanted help. I just assumed that it would be easier for me to do it, and I assumed I was being helpful. Dad told me pretty early on, actually, that it really bothered him when I did that. He explained that he did not need me to make the tea, he just needed me to lay everything out on the countertop for him so he could take his time and do it himself. He expressed that me just taking over made him feel a bit useless and quite upset, because he felt that everything had to be done for him, which wasn't the case at all. He was still really independent at that point. Now, there may be instances further down the line where your loved one really does need you to take over a task, but they won't ask, or more likely they won't admit that they need your help, and that can be hard. But when it's still safe for them to be doing tasks alone, like getting dressed or making tea and coffee, things like that, then be mindful that although they require more time, they don't necessarily need you to step in, and they don't want you to do it for them. Always ask. Don't just assume the person can't do that task without help. So I suppose what I'm trying to say here is that I found it very helpful to try and encourage my dad's independence. It made him feel more confident, and it maintained a much more peaceful environment at home. Finding out a loved one has dementia has an impact on us emotionally and practically. Today in part 2 we talked about the practical impact, But if you'd like to hear more about the emotional impact, then please check out part 1 over on our channel. Remember, it's okay to get things wrong sometimes, and we all have unique reactions to finding out our loved one has dementia. I would strongly advise carers of someone with a rare form of dementia to head over to the Rare Dementia Support YouTube channel and take a look at some of their webinars. They're a brilliant source of information, and they offer some really helpful strategies and tips for you to manage the emotional and practical impact of a diagnosis. I've linked their channel in the description below if you'd like to have a look. Please remember to like and share this video and subscribe to Seeing Things Differently to help our channel grow and get our support out there for the people that really need it. Thank you so much for watching, and please remember to check out part 1, the emotional impact of finding out a loved one has a diagnosis, if you haven't already. From myself and from Arlo, see you all again next time.